Linghung in midsummer is sultry and hot, the sky is blue and white clouds are mixed with a trace of dryness. Last night, after a rain, the temperature rose instead of falling. Cicadas screamed and noisy, and roses bloomed just right on the black iron fence of the school. Suyu lay on the second floor with a white school bag on his back, looking at the lively basketball court in the distance through the dense tree shadow gap. On the exposed plastic track, there was a group of boys running. After waiting for a while, Chen Lizzie and a young female teacher finally walked out of the academic affairs office. Suyu stood up straight and yelled, "Auntie!" Chen Lizzie nodded, took her arm around, and smiled with the fat female teacher next to her and said, "Then our child will be handed over to you." Suwaru pushed his glasses, glanced down at the name on the list, and read out, "Suyu, weird, have the same last name with me. Linghung No. 1 Middle School, the best private school in Linghung." Because of his parents' job transfer, Suyu came to this big northern city with him. "I dragged my aunt to find a relationship and transferred to this school as a transfer student. The first middle school is divided into middle school and high school. Most of the students are local, and there are not many boarding students. When my father came, he was teaching all the way. Let her go there and study hard, don't waste time. Suyu has top-notch grades since childhood, is well-behaved and does not cause trouble, and has strict tutoring." Suwaru felt very satisfied looking at Suyu's obedient appearance. "I couldn't help thinking that finally there was a decent transfer student who was able to get into class. After thinking about it, I was a little worried. The child is quiet, and seems to be easily bullied. Last semester, she was arranged by the school to be the head teacher of Class 9 for half a year, which really took a lot of trouble. The group of students in the class, one by one, is a headache. Disrespect the teacher, don't care about the class's sense of collective honor, like fighting and making troubles. Private aristocratic schools like No. 1 Middle School are places where young masters and ladies get together. But Class 9 is notorious, and a group of students are particularly evil. One by one, the temper is more awkward, and there is a strong sense of superiority." After receiving the books in the textbook section, Suyu went to the class behind the head teacher. The school bell just hit, and boys and girls in school uniforms passed by in twos and threes. Two boys in basketball uniforms met in the corridor. When they saw Suwaru, they immediately stopped to salute, and the two shouted in unison, "Hello, Teacher Su." Suyu was shocked by the loud voice. The male classmates in the north seem to be so tall and big, and their voices are also very loud. Su Hui nodded as a gesture, and asked casually, "You just finished physical education class?" "Hee." One of the boys with dark skin and sweaty face stretched out his neck and looked at Suyu, who was standing quietly behind the head teacher, and asked with a smile, "Teacher, is this the new classmate in our class?" Suwaru waved his hand and sent them away, "Many things. Go far." Su Hui confessed to her, "In the future, you will pay less attention to those unlearned boys in your class. Do you know if you study hard?" Suyu nodded, "I see, teacher." "Okay." Su Hui looked at the cotton dress she was wearing, and remembered, "When I finish class in the morning, I will go to the lobby of this Heshan building to pick up the school uniform." On a corner, Class 9 is next to the stairs. The classroom is lively, chasing and playing, noisy people, all playing their own way. The moment Su Hui stepped into the door, she gradually calmed down. Everyone focused on the one behind the head teacher, the transfer student who was unfamiliar in the class. Suyu held the book and stood near the podium. The bright sunlight softly outlines her figure, with soft black hair hanging down on her chest. A white dress just over the knee, short cotton socks, showing whitish ankles. Because the next physics class is about to begin, the teacher is already waiting at the door. Su Hui didn't intend to let Suyu introduce herself. She clapped her hands and said briefly to them, "This is a new classmate, Suyu, everyone welcomes." A brief silence. Welcome new classmates. Some naughty boys in the back row sat on the desk with their elbows propped on their knees, whistling to Suyu, and laughed along with the boys. Okay, don't make trouble. Suwaru patted the desk with one hand to stop the agitated atmosphere. She glanced around, stretched her finger in the direction behind the four groups at random, and said to Suyu, "You sit in that empty position first." After 2 seconds, Suwaru seemed to realize something was wrong. He hesitated for a while, and patted Suyu on the shoulder. "You will sit for a while, and you will change positions next week. It is good." So Suyu walked through the group gap under the gaze of the whole class and walked to stand in the aisle of the last few rows behind the four groups. It was messy there, and there were still a few cigarette butts that had been smothered in half-inhaled lying sporadically on the ground. Books and scratch paper were piled unorganized on the tables and chairs, and there were basketballs under the bench. Suyu stopped and stood there, a little hesitant. In the penultimate row, a boy in a black t-shirt sat inside, without a school uniform. He leaned against the wall and blatantly bowed his head to play with his phone. It seems that she hasn't looked up since she entered the classroom. Seeing Suyu stopping there, the person who just whistled smiled at the boy playing with the mobile phone. "ACI, your new table mate is here." The boy named ACI propped his head with one hand and propped it on the desk. It is estimated that he had run in the physical education class just now, with wet black hair. He was chewing gum in his mouth and ignored it at first. After being pushed by someone leaning over, he slowly raised his head. Dark eyes swept up and down the girl standing in front of her. A second or two passed. He languidly moved his legs down on the chair to make room for Suyu. "Wait." Suwaru temporarily regretted it and shouted at the door of the classroom, "Song Yifun, you change positions with your new classmate and let Suyu sit in the front row." Suyu was relieved in his heart. The next class is a physics class. The teacher is a middle-aged man from the Mediterranean, nicknamed Li Titu. He is also known to be one of the best in his grade, treating students as if he is an enemy, and ruthless as the autumn wind sweeps the fallen leaves. Although the students in Class 9 are not good enough, they are still a little bit frustrated. The group leader came down and received the exercise books of the last physics homework one by one. Suyu lowered his head, took out the book and pencil case from his school bag, and put them on the desk. "Then sort out the new books I just received, and arrange them neatly." Her table mate is a very beautiful girl with cosmetics and curling irons on the table. The small curly hair at the same table draped behind him, holding a small mirror to make up the lipstick. Suyu hurriedly glanced, straightened her body, looked at the blackboard, and prepared to listen carefully. The group leader of the fourth group is a girl wearing glasses, tall, with a ponytail. When she received the row behind Suyu, she deliberately put the book on the table heavily, and her voice was shrill, "Thank you, hand in your homework." It turned out that he was a thank you. Suyu thought inwardly. Waited a while. "I didn't write it." An indifferent voice sounded like a smile. Song Yifun said weirdly, "Team leader, you don't accept the homework of our group of people behind, so I just focused on ACI. Isn't it, He deliberately lengthened the tone, provoking and flirting, making the group behind laugh. "Song Heepi, why are you so annoying?" The team leader cursed, flicked his hair, and carried the homework to his arms and walked away. Suyu tried to concentrate on the podium, but still heard bursts of laughter from the rear right. The seniors dare to accept homework, and the team leader is awesome. Li Titu is preparing to teach a new class, electromagnetics. Electromagnetism is one of the more important difficulties in high school physics. Suyu had finished studying in the cram school a long time ago, and brushed up many sets of questions. She took out the physics book and turned to the page the teacher wanted to talk about. For her, learning and doing problems are instinctive things like breathing. "Hey, new classmate, what's your name?" Fu Suoli finished her makeup, picked up the student ID Suyu put on the table, and glanced at it. "Suyu." Suyu lowered her voice, lowered her eyelashes and nodded lightly. The name is strange. Suyu. It seems a bit. My name is Fuswali, Snow and Snow, Litsy's Li. She introduced herself. Suyu glanced at her quietly, then nodded, remember, your name is so nice. Fuswali laughed out loud, wondering if the child was a bit natural. Seeing her being a good student, she was afraid of being discovered by the teacher when she talked in class. Fuswali thought it was really cute. Friends who play with her are either old fritters or rebels. No one is afraid of the teacher. Class 9 is highly polarized and there are many small groups. It is roughly divided into two groups, those who are well learned and those who are rich. No one on both sides looks down on anyone, but there is a consensus that no one will provoke anyone. Fuswali is a typical person who has money and spends his life, and his friends are ignorant and eat, drink and have fun all day long. It was the first time she had come into contact with a girl like Suyu, who had a face to the sky, a soft voice, and small and clean eyebrows. The face is also small, and the stature is also small, like a junior high school student. At first glance, it is a good student with a regular life schedule and excellent academic performance. Fuswali slandered herself secretly, put Suyu's student ID back to her original place, and bored her with her mobile phone to play. There were 2 classes left in the morning, and they passed in a flash. Suyu didn't like to squeeze with others, so he planned to wait until everyone was gone. She casually pulled a piece of draft paper and lay on the table, step by step counting a topic the teacher assigned during class. New classmates, love to study so much. Song Yifan walked past Suyu and glanced casually. Seeing her lowering her head and brushing and writing, she couldn't help but sigh, oh, she's very motivated. The dignified voice was not used to being serious. Suyu had a meal with the tip of his pen. After a few seconds, I didn't know what to say, so I immersed myself in the calculation. Suddenly, with a sigh, a book hit Song Yifan. Fuswali glared at him, and said straightforwardly, don't make fun of the little girl. Worry. Song Yifan rubbed his shoulder painfully. I was at the same table with you just now. Why is it so violent to show that he cares for his new classmates? Go away. Fuswali was too lazy to deal with Song Yifan, she still didn't know what he was thinking. She put on her shoulder bag and squeezed it out from behind Suyu. Suyu, when are you going to eat? Hey! Suyu looked up at Fuswali, thought for a while and said, I'll go right away. At this time, a group of boys from outside the class were waiting at the door of the class. Someone probed inside and called, ACI, are you all right? Song Yifan immediately promised, here is here, he and I will go right away, and you will block people first. There seems to be a sudden wind. A pair of black and red sneakers appeared in Suyu Yuguang. The thank you note stopped by her side, carrying the school uniform jacket with one hand. The draft paper on the table was suddenly taken away, and Suyu was caught off guard. A black ink pen draws a line on the paper. Her sight shifted. Hit a pair of dark eyes, the corners of the eyes were slightly raised. The man, leaning on her desk, held a thin sheet of paper between his index and middle fingers, tilted his head cynically, and glanced. On draft paper. A few lines of square and beautiful lowercase letters, the problem-solving formulas are neatly listed. Help me write a physics homework. He finished speaking lazily, and left the classroom with the rest of the boys in the class. After Suyu carefully studied the topics assigned by the teacher, there was basically no one in the classroom. The electric fan overhead was still spinning slowly, and the vertical air conditioning fan blades closed. She packed up her things, closed the door of the classroom and went out. The school is very large. The middle and high schools are not in the same district. There are several supermarkets and milk tea shops along the way. The wind was mixed with heat waves, and the oily road was hot. The shadows on both sides of the trail were shaded by the teaching buildings. Su Yu asked someone for directions and found Zhishan building to lead the school uniform. There are 2 sets of school uniforms in spring and autumn, both of which are packed in transparent plastic bags. After coming out of Zhishan building, Su Yu circled a few times. I found an aisle full of rose flowers next to it, and there was an old wall across a piece of grass. The wall-climbing tiger was dappled by the sun. Very secluded place. After a pause, she saw a cat running in with some joy. Su Yu walked over and squatted down. In the damp soil, there are some unknown small white flowers and butterflies that accidentally stayed here. Su Yu likes flowers. She has been with her grandmother since she was a child. There is a small flower garden in front of my grandmother's house, full of gardenias, orchids, sunflowers, and magnolias. Probably because there are no friends to play with, Su Yu's personality has always been very quiet. Every time after school, she squatted in front of the flower garden with her school bag on her back, sometimes smelling it, and then it was time for dinner. The leaves were rustling by the wind, she watched for a while, propped on her knees, and planned to stand up and go to the dormitory. Suddenly, there was a rush of footsteps, mixed with the sound of a group of boys cursing and approaching. Su Yu's heart tightened, and he looked out of the gap with his head sideways, and was taken aback for a moment, covering his mouth with his hand. It seems that there are 2 groups of people arguing about something, pushing and shoving. Su Yu held his breath and watched carefully for a while, not daring to move for fear of being discovered. When she was a child, she was dragged by her brother to watch young and dangerous Hong Kong movies, which left a lot of shadow on those hacking scenes. So I am very afraid of punks, especially in that group of people. There are still a few boys dyed with yellow hair, looking like social youth. After a few glances, she found that there were 2 people in the group that were familiar. It seems like a classmate. Su Yu was a little dumbfounded. The boy who was very rude and grabbed her draft paper, and another naughty black boy. Song Yifan, thank you. Among a group of people pushing and shoving, the 2 of them stood on the side chatting. Thanks to her, wearing a school uniform jacket, leaning against the wall, smoking casually. Thanks, you, don't think I am afraid of you if there are too many people. Fu Yi instant clenched his fists, and was very angry. Do you think you are a dick? Find someone to me. Hey how do you talk? Someone couldn't help it anymore, and went forward to push Fu's shoulders for a moment, but also angry. You are stubborn, so don't go to Chiu Ching Ching. Are you deaf? One person did it first, and the rest began to move around. The atmosphere is tense and raging. Song Yifan's mouth was poor, and he didn't forget to make a joke at this time. Do you still dare to ask us if ACI did? The thanks gave him a faint glance. Hat, let me tell you. Song Yifan pointed at the person with one hand, and threw a small stone with the other hand, with his chin held high. There is no chaos, brother Ci has the final say, I know if you don't. Another person agreed, taking advantage of the number of people to show off his power. Do you think you are the boss of class 6? You have a thick skin, and keeps Chiu Ching Ching. Su Yu was hiding not far away, thinking silently in his heart. It turned out to be for a girl, alas. Being humiliated by a woman. Fu Yi instantaneously exploded at one point, and he took the collar of the boy who opened his mouth and punched it up. The grass Nima. Accompanied by an angry roar. The rest of the people swarmed up, and the 2 parties immediately scuffled together. After fighting for a while, there were not many people there, and he was quickly defeated and crushed to the ground. Thanks to separate the crowd, pulling Fu Yukin's clothes, dragging it on the grass, and flicking it against the wall. Fu Yi struggling for an instant, trying to give thanks. But he was dragged by his hair, and his face was forced to lift up. I don't like others, hold my finger at me. He leaned over, narrowing his aggressive eyes, and met Fu's face for a moment. On the wall next to him, he squeezed out the cigarette butts. Remember. When the group of people left, Su Yu squatted on the spot with a pale face and calmed down for half an hour before daring to stand up. Only half a day after coming to school, I have already seen how crazy the group of bad boys are. I can't eat any more. She didn't dare to wander around the campus more, carrying her school bag, holding the school uniform in her arms, and found the dormitory according to the signs. Because it was a transfer student, and there were not many boarding students in class 9, Su Yu was assigned to the dormitory of another class. The quadruple room is equipped with air conditioning and separate bathroom, and the conditions are good. There are very few people in the dormitory during lunch break. Su Yu's bedroom is on the 4th floor. In the morning, Chen Lizzie had helped her clean up the bed and set everything up, and the aunt in the girls' bedroom had also come to explain. When Su Yu pushed the door in, the girls inside were not very surprised. Chen Xiao pierced his head, sitting cross-legged on the bed and playing with his mobile phone. As soon as he looked up, he saw Su Yu coming in through the door. Air conditioning is turned on in the bedroom. As soon as Su Yu entered, her sweaty back was pressed against the cotton clothes, and she felt cold when she was blown by the cold air. There are 3 girls in the dormitory, 2 of them belong to class 5, and 1 of them belong to Sunshine class. The roommates are all very nice, and Su Yu simply chatted with them and went to pack his own things. Take the time to go to the bathroom and take a shower, and wash the school uniforms by the way. When he came out, Su Yu wiped his wet long hair with a towel and wore Winnie the Pooh nightdress, showing his thighs. Chen Xiao's eyes lit up and he sighed and said, "My God, Su Yu, you are so white. It's not ordinary paleness, it's the kind of whiteness that is watery and moisturized, and the skin is red. No wonder it's from the south. It's really a land that feeds a person." Su Yu smiled embarrassedly. The girl in the Sunshine class was named Li Lingfeng. She was lying on her desk doing her homework. He glanced at Su Yu and asked, "Which class are you from?" "Hey." Su Yu moved for a while, thought about it, and said, "It seems to be in class 9. "Wow, you are in class 9. Chen Xiao became interested in an instant, and stopped playing on his mobile phone. He said enthusiastically, "There are a lot of handsome guys in that class, and they all seem to be quite rich." Handsome guy? A person popped out of her mind. Not very clear. Su Yu sat on her bed, pursed her lips, and thought about what happened at noon. Class 9. Both Liao Yuemin and Chen Xiao had heard of the 9th class. Every Monday during the flag-raising ceremony, the warning list of the Office of Academic Affairs reads out a long list of the names of the 9 classes. Those few people are familiar with them, and they are also famous in their grades, and they don't even bother to care about the dean. The school still didn't take them as well, probably because the family was powerful. Liao Yuemin sometimes goes to the bathroom after class. He often encounters a group of boys holding basketballs walking together in 2s and 3s in the corridor. They don't wear school uniforms, they are tall, and they like to whistle to beautiful girls who come and go. Sometimes she accidentally looked at someone inside, and she was ashamed and hurriedly bowed her head. At first, I thought they were special talents in the physical education class. Later, from the scattered gossip among the other population, I learned that those people were from class 9 and couldn't afford it. Even if there is nothing to do all day, no learning and skill, young masters who will have no worries in the future. And she is not a person of the same world. Our grade grass is also in your class. Liao Yuemin joined the topic and looked at Su Yu. "Did you go in the morning and see a particularly handsome boy?" "Thanks." Li Lingfeng turned the pen in her hand and rushed to ask. Chen Xiao and Liao Yuemin asked at the same time, "Aren't you blindly paying attention to things outside the window and concentrating on reading only the sage's books?" Li Lingfeng shrugged. "The remarks of thanks seem to have something to do with Banhua in our class. The class flower of the Sunshine class, Chu Qingqing, has good grades. People are particularly arrogant, many people chase." Known as the Shenjiyi version of Linqi No. 1 Middle School. No, no, it's not a resignation. It's Su Xing Chun, the top 3 schoolmaster, seems to be the squad leader. Liao Yuemin pouted, but the thank you words are also very handsome, but I feel that he is too carefree, and it is so fast to change girlfriends. Su Yu listened to their gossip and felt unable to join the topic, so she was silent. Sit on the bed and wait for the hair to dry slowly. In a daze, she began to feel sad. What should I do with the physics homework of the senior boss? The lunch break passed in a flash. The afternoon class starts at 2:30, and there are 3 sessions. Evening self-study does not force day students to attend. Su Yu put the books in his school bag, put on a short sleeve, put on a school uniform and went to the classroom. On September day, it was extremely hot afternoon. I walked all the way, and when I got to the classroom, sweat broke out on my forehead. It was 2:15, and there were only 2 or 3 people in the classroom. Su Yu sat in the seat, looked around, took out the book, and shook his head. If it hadn't been for the knowledge that their class had just finished physical education in the morning, she would almost doubt if everyone ran to the sports ground for the first class. I wrote math problems quietly for a while, and people came to the classroom one after another. With a pen in her hand, Su Yu lowered her head to flip through the book, and suddenly a cup of crushed ice was placed on the desk. She looked up, Fu Suoli carried Hello Kitty's small leather bag, and said with a smile, "My kid, I bought it for you." "Hey!" Su Yu hurriedly stood up, let Fu Suoli in, stammering, "This, What are you mine?" Fu Suoli shook her head and raised her eyebrows, "If you don't drink, I will lose it." After a few seconds, Su Yu lowered his head and said softly, "Thank you." She thought about it. I feel that the new classmates in this class do not seem to be as bad as external rumors. At least her desk mate, Fu Suoli, is really a warm and beautiful girl. Su Yu bit the straw and secretly glanced at the person sitting next to him playing with the phone. She accidentally took a big mouthful, the crushed ice was too cold, and she was shocked by the cold. I couldn't help but cough, and I was afraid that it would affect other students in the classroom, so I could only cover my mouth. Su Yu rarely drank this kind of things. When she was at home, she only drank cold boiled water and mung bean water. That kind of weird drinks and cold drinks, never touched. Looking at her like this, Fu Suoli laughed out loud and suddenly asked, "Hey, kid, do you have a boyfriend?" "Hey!" Su Yu was stunned, shook his head, "No. You are so cute, no one is chasing you." Su Yu was embarrassed, "I'm not cute, you are the first person to praise me for being cute." "Really?" Fu Suoli laughed again, "It means I have a good vision." The 2 of them were just lying on their seats, Yu and I chatted. In fact, Su Yu is not an introverted girl in the traditional sense, just a little bit slower. After getting acquainted, she felt that she actually had a lot to say. Gradually, the class was full and a little noisy, and the teacher took the handout and walked onto the podium. Su Yu quickly drank the rest of the cup, tidied up the table, and took out his Chinese textbook. "Hey, why are there 2 empty seats behind the 4 groups? Who is sitting?" The Chinese teacher pointed his finger over and asked the class leader. "Thanks and Song Yifan." The squad leader stood up and answered in a calm voice. Obviously, he had dealt with this kind of problem many times. The Chinese teacher rolled his eyes and did not continue to ask. These 2 people will step into the classroom if they are better, and be late if they are worse. Teachers in various subjects feel annoyed, but they have nothing to do. After drinking a sip of water, she picked up the chalk and wrote "Jing Ke assassinated the king of Qin" on the blackboard. Halfway through the writing, the back door of the classroom was knocked open with a bang. The whole class looked over, and the Chinese teacher paused and turned his head. Thanks to the words and Song Yifan, looking at the eyes of the whole class casually, one after another, came in leisurely. The Chinese teacher seemed to bear it for a while, without losing his temper, turned his head and continued to finish writing the words on the blackboard. Su Yu listened to the movement behind with fear. Boom, boom. The two uncles pulled out their chairs, made a loud noise, and finally sat down. What are you doing? Has the matter been resolved in a moment? Fu Suoli leaned back on the Thanksgiving table, lowered her voice, and turned to look at them. Too lazy to speak, he flipped a book from the drawer and slammed the table. Song Yifan shook his legs, and said indifferently, Fu Yuquan counts as a dick. ACI and I found someone to get him out of the game, and then went to the internet cafe to play games. No, ACI, you really made a deal with Chu Ching Ching. Fu Suoli looked at him, that woman is a bitch, I don't like it. You're just jealous that others are better looking than you. Song Yifan didn't care about it next to him. No, Song Yifan, don't you think? Fu Suoli looked serious. ACI took her out to play a few times, and felt that she looked down upon us with poor grades. Song Yifan didn't care again, and said, isn't it because people get mud and don't get stained? He didn't say a word from the beginning to the end, and became a little impatient, so he leaned on the desk and got ready to sleep. Okay, let's learn a new lesson today. The Chinese teacher stood on the podium and cleared his throat. It's all quiet, I'll find someone to read the text. Okay. The class was silent for a moment. Nima. There is something wrong with such a long text in classical Chinese, you have to find someone to read it. Most of the people in the class quickly lowered their heads, avoiding her patrolling gaze. The Chinese teacher scanned for a week, his eyes lit up, and pointed to Su Yu, who was sitting upright, and asked, well, the girl in the back, are you the transfer student who came in the morning? Su Yu was dumbfounded for a moment. When she reacted to the teacher's question, she looked at herself in all directions, blushing involuntarily, stood up silently, and nodded. What is it called? Su Yu. Where did it come from? Zizhu. Oh, this place. The Chinese teacher thought for a while and nodded thoughtfully, Southerners, no wonder it's so white. When the words fell silent, the whole class burst into laughter. Su Yu stood neatly, bowing his head slightly. Although she has excellent grades since childhood, she is the darling in the eyes of the teacher. But I don't know why, she is afraid of being called up to answer questions, and every time she stands up, her ears can be read. This kind of well-behaved and quiet female classmate is very popular with Chinese teachers. She nodded and said, then you come and read this text with us. The summer sun passes through the glass, and there is a line of light in the air, with fine particles rising and falling. The sleeves of Su Yu's school uniform were rolled to the elbow, revealing a thin, white arm. She picked up the language document and started reading from the first line. Word by word. The voice has the soft waxy characteristic of Jiangnan, the accent is slow, especially soothing and soft. Qin General Wang Jian breaks Zhao, captives Zhao Zhao, take all the land, advance to the north, to the southern boundary of Yan. The Chinese teacher nodded as he listened. The wrinkles on his face were laughed out, and he was very satisfied. Not only did Su Yu read smoothly, but also many jerky pronunciations were accurate. It is the effect of previewing in advance. She was interrupted by the teacher when she read the wind is cold and the water is cold. Stop! The Chinese teacher made a gesture and said gently, you read this sentence again. Su Yu hesitated, the wind is slack. It's wind, feng, rear nasal sound. The Chinese teacher interrupted her, and said kindly, it's not fen, you have a poor reading. Wind, wind. Su Yu reacted for a while, lacking confidence. It is true that Southerners often do not distinguish between rear and front nasal sounds, and Mandarin is not as good as Northerners. Song Yifan was right behind Su Yu and could hear clearly. He finally couldn't help but laugh, shaking his body. The thank you note on the side held his head with one hand, his eyes lowered, and he read the phrase the wind is slack and the water is cold in the book, grinning and grinning. The two brothers laughed, and the others laughed. Classroom discipline was destroyed instantly. The Chinese teacher was talking and found that there was a noise again behind him. I couldn't help but banged on the blackboard vigorously, and was mad at seeing the ruffians of the group of boys, Song Yifan. What a laugh, you come to read. Song Yifan closed his smiling face for a second, and said bitterly, I am not laughing alone, I am also laughing at the same table. Then you guys together. The Chinese teacher heaved a sigh of relief and said, Su Yu, sit down first. Some people in the back give me sleep if they don't want to attend the class. Don't break the class discipline. Although Su Yu was embarrassed by the smile, he breathed a sigh of relief and sat down quietly. Fu Suoli came over to comfort her, It's okay, kids, Song Yifan and the others are so cheap and used to it, don't worry about it. Su Yu nodded, not irritated, and whispered, I don't mind. In fact, it doesn't matter much, anyway, she has a good temper. After waiting for a while, the two people behind stood up, dragging their feet. Teacher, I are illiterate, can you let us go? Song Yifan grinned and continued to be poor. The Chinese teacher's eyes stared, if you want you to read it, just read it, where is so much nonsense? The thanks start first. He leaned his shoulders against the wall, took the book to his eyes, glanced at it, and continued to say lazily, It's xioxyoxy and easy to be cold. As soon as this sentence came out, the whole class burst into laughter. The Chinese teacher glared wide and widened, Do you guys never finish? Read it to me. Su Yu lowered his head, looked at the Chinese textbook, and did not smile. She was even more embarrassed by the deliberate thought of the person behind. Ugh! She is a little tired. After a daze, Song Yifan's yin and yang tone made Su Yu a little bit more energetic, so he continued to hold the pen and listened carefully. After finishing the two Chinese classes with great difficulty, the last one is a self-study class. 10 minutes after class, all kinds of gods, demons, and ghosts were making trouble, and the tables and benches were made to move and noisy by a group of squatting boys. Su Yu opened an extracurricular material with annotated text and prepared to copy the explanations of some key sentences in the new class. After writing for a while, the class bell rang. Everyone returned to their original positions, and those who went to the toilet flew back to the classroom from the corridor. Su Yu took the book she had placed on the table and added a note to her by the way. The self-study class is generally quiet, with a few noises occasionally. Hey, change the position. Thanks abruptly. Song Yifan was inexplicable, what are you doing? Thanks and kicked him, hurry up, so much nonsense. Then there was a little movement between the two. Su Yu's pen tip paused for a while, and only after he was sure that nothing happened, did he relax and continue to work on his homework. 10 minutes passed quietly. Suddenly someone kicked her bench, accompanied by a voice, Hey, my physics homework. Su Yu's heart twitched. I don't know how to answer, and I didn't write it myself. I didn't want to disturb others to explain to him, so I just pretended not to hear and continued to copy notes. After a while, her bench was kicked twice again. Su Yu's back straightened, and when he finished kicking, he continued to do his homework. Song Yifan cast meaningful glances frequently. Su Yu's expression was stiff, and she was ignored. Until the bench she was sitting on was hooked by someone's feet and dragged backwards abruptly. There was a squeaky sound, which frightened her, and hurriedly held on to the edge of the table. People around him cast surprised eyes, and Fu Suoli was also awakened. Su Yu finally couldn't help it. She turned to him and didn't dare to look at him. She lowered her eyebrows and murmured quietly, Classmate, your physics homework, me. What are you doing? I don't know where to do it. Bring the book. Xie looked at her condescendingly. What? Su Yu was stunned. Physics book. What? Thanks for leaning back on the back of the chair, raising his chin slightly, and raising his eyebrows, I will help you figure out the question. It's really rare to see such an unreasonable boy. Su Yu suppressed his anger, spread out the sketchy physics book on the table, copying questions from the exercise book, and comforting himself. Help the black boss at the back with his homework, just write it. Anyway, she can't afford it either. Forbearance a moment, calm, take a step back, a brighter future. Having endured her temper, she still wanted to yell at the boy behind, can't you write your own homework? In his exercise book, the handwriting of the previous physics homework is different every time. Su Yu flipped through it, probably knowing that he was not the first to help him with his homework. There are few traces of the teacher's review and revision, and generally only one date is signed. Obviously, he turned a blind eye to the abominable act of asking his classmates to write the thanks. Teacher Karen can't control him, let alone her. 3 times 5 divided by 2, Su Yu finished his physics homework in only 10 minutes. The exercises in the book are all basic, and Su Yu physics has always been a strong point, and it is easy to write. Classes were over in a few minutes, and several boys in the back row of the classroom disappeared one after another. Fu Suoli stretched out, pressed her hands on her shoulders and turned her arms, and said to Su Yu, "You don't have to write so seriously, just draw 2 strokes at random." In fact, she is really inexplicable. Why did you want Su Yu to do his homework for him? Anyway, the teacher doesn't care if he handed in. It's okay, it's finished. Su Yu pressed her lips slightly, finished the last word, and put down the pen. She looked up at the clocks hanging in the classroom. Ring the bell immediately. Su Yu closed the physics homework book, held it in his hand and passed it back without turning his head. No one answered after waiting for 2 or 3 seconds. She turned her head. He greeted him with a smile and a smile. He didn't mean to reach out to pick it up at all. Su Yu could feel the gaze of interest, and sighed silently in his heart, without saying anything. Put the workbook on his desk and turn around. In a blink of an eye, Friday afternoon, the first and second high school students can put on the weekend after the second class in the afternoon. The gate of Lynchy No. 1 High School was crowded with people from other schools, and it was very busy. Thanks. They left the school early in the morning, and a group of people waited at the coffee shop next to the school. Today is the birthday of Li Jia in class 4. He usually plays well with the Thankyou group. Just on the weekend, he is going to go out to have fun at night. The phone buzzed and vibrated on the original wooden table. It rang and stopped. With a poker card in his hand, he took the time to take a glance, and he was ignorant. Not for a while. Song Si stabbed him in the back and whispered, "Brother," at the door. Chu Ching Ching clenched his hands into a fist and stood on the steps of the coffee shop for a while. All kinds of gazes rolled around her with unkind intentions. Her arrogance and strong self-esteem prevented her from entering that door. Through the transparent glass window, she could even easily see the profile of her thanks, biting a cigarette in her mouth, and throwing out playing cards in her hand. The phone is at hand, but he just won't answer it. How long will your girlfriend take? Thanks for playing cards, felt boring, threw the remaining cards on the table, and asked Li Jia, "Can you call her to hurry up? It's still early without eating, where do you want to go?" Li Yujia saw that he was not playing anymore, and put down the cards in his hand. "When I just wanted to talk, I raised my eyes to see the person behind me, and the words that came out of my mouth turned halfway, and raised my eyebrows playfully. Yo, my girlfriend didn't wait, I waited for you." "Thanks." A forbearing female voice rang. With half a cigarette still in his mouth, he turned his head on the edge of the table with his elbows in his mouth. Chu Ching Ching was 2 meters away from him, with red eyes, and said word by word, "Come out with me and speak clearly." She chose to come in to find him. After all, she believed that the words of thanks were different to her, relying on him to like herself. "Thanks for not speaking, other voices dare not say anything, you look at me, I look at you. Collective silence. What's going on here? When did ACI and Shen Ji quarrel? CSCI stroked his hair, his face was faintly expressionless. What are you going out to do? Chu Ching Ching, we will break up if we don't go out. Xiesisong bit the cigarette and smiled, that's it. As soon as he finished speaking, he was splashed with a glass of cold water. He only had time to close his eyes. Water drops slowly slipped from his black hair, eyelashes, lips, and cheeks. The smoke in his lips was also wiped out. Everyone took a breath. This woman has courage. There are not many who dare to move like this, right? Fu Suoli was originally looking down at her mobile phone, but she raised her head to look over there after being so disturbed. Only saw Chu Ching Ching running out from the back. The lady boss took a clean white towel and handed it a thank you note. Don't chase. The thanks were still indifferent, and he took off the cigarette from his mouth and humbled his eyes. Song Yifan knew that he was squeezing anger. After hesitating for 2 seconds, he asked, what's the matter with you and Chu Ching Ching? He knows that thanking this kid, it's fast to change his girlfriend. There are many girls chasing her, and there are also many ex-girlfriends. Basically, he gets tired of dating in less than a week or two. However, after staying with Chu Ching Ching last month, it seems that I haven't made any trouble with the words of thanks. Song Yifan almost thought that he was about to turn his back on the prodigal son. Unexpectedly, this came out today. Did it happen last night? Li Jiai chuckled and asked thiefly. Thanks to the remarks, he was too lazy to reply, and bit a cigarette into his mouth again. They went to sing last night, and Chu Ching Ching also came, sitting next to the remarks, and no one paid any attention. Seeing her unwillingness to communicate with them, everyone knows not to bother. After all, the famous 3 good students in the grade are beautiful. People are too arrogant. After singing, someone drank some wine and started playing Truth or Dare. A group of people had fun, and lost a big adventure, so they had a fight with a girl. Anyway, I'm used to it, no one can rest assured. However, Chu Kingking's face was ugly, and he slammed the door and left on the spot. Break up today. Fu Suoli looked disapproving. As long as the points are divided, there is no shortage of women in ACI. With that said, Li Yuja's girlfriend Tu Yuyu finally came with a group of her friends. There are about 2 or 3 school girls, all a little shy. When they saw a group of sophomores sitting there with handles, they shouted in unison, "Hello, senior sister. Sister is good." Some people are not serious when they see a pretty girl. The thank you note was smothered after smoking half a cigarette, and it was thrown into the trash can next to it. He picked up the phone on the table and said to a group of people, "Go." As the traffic drove around, the sky dimmed. The lights in this city were gradually lit up, and the fragrance of roses and gardenias floated in the air. On Friday night, the streets were noisy. Suyu carried the bag in both hands. It contains the daily necessities and snacks just bought in the supermarket. Not long after school in the afternoon, she was dragged out of school by Chen Xiao and went to Walmart to buy things. The two had a meal outside by the way. At this time, the stomach is a little swollen, so I plan to walk back to school and digest by the way. There are a lot of people today. Chen Xiao took Suyu's arm and walked along the roadside and said, "It's finally a holiday. I'll go back to the bedroom to make up for the drama I haven't watched before." Suyu rolled her eyes around her face. "The monthly exam is about to go, don't you review it?" "Is there anything to review? My parents don't care about my grades anyway." Chen Xiao curled his mouth, lowered his head to reply to the text message, and did not notice that a black SUV was slowly parked beside them. A rapid horn sounded. Suyu paused before turning his head to look at the sound source subconsciously. The black glass on the front and rear windows of the SUV slowly dropped. Fu Suoli lay on the edge of the car, leaned out half of her body, and waved at them with a smile. "What a coincidence, kid, where are you and your friends going? We will take you. Chen Xiao's mouth opened slightly into a zero shape. It's not. It's not. The group of people in class 9. Thanks for resigning with one hand on the steering wheel, bending his elbow on the edge of the window, looking straight to this side. The evening breeze blows, sandwiching the warmth of summer night. Su Yu recovered. She replied, no trouble, thank you. Don't. Fu Suoli gestured to push the car door down. Su Yu stepped back 2 steps, raised something in his hand, and said seriously, it's not heavy, my friend and I just finished our meal, so we will leave by the way. In fact, she was afraid of resigning and driving. He is a minor, driving on the road without a license is really dangerous. Her long hair was loose and tied behind her head. Wearing a white school uniform with short sleeves, standing not far from the street lamp, his temperament is gentle and soft. Inside the car, Li Jiai sat in the co-pilot, tilted his head back and looked at Su Yu, and asked, who is that person? I don't seem to have seen him in school. Do you know? Cai glanced in the rear-view mirror and then retracted his gaze. Looking ahead, he tapped the steering wheel with his fingers. Ang, our classmate, Fu Suoli is at the same table. Do you have a boyfriend? Li Jiai asked curiously. When Fu Suoli heard it exploded, she glared at him, a good student, you can save it. The meaning is obvious. Let him leave Su Yu. What's wrong with a good student? Ask ACI, he has fewer good students. Li Jiai looked ambiguous. Fu Suoli rolled her eyes, it's different from those green tea who are standing and standing. She is very simple. If you dare to move me at the same table, I will find someone to make you believe it or not. Seeing her old hen's protective posture, Song Yifan, who was sitting aside, couldn't understand. Su Yu is your long-lost sister, how come you can transfer to another school for a few days? The word innocence has come. How long have you been together, Dalitzi, is the relationship with you so good? No. Fu Suoli said solemnly, I think it is good to study, and people who are particularly good, I like them very much. Moreover, she turned her head to look at Song Yifan, and said, don't you think she is particularly cute? She has a very good temper. I don't think you are worthy of such a good girl. Really? Su Yu carries a soft and tranquil temperament that she thinks she probably won't have in this life. Very attractive. There was a short silence. He snorted, his head tilted, and his gaze swept out the window again. After Su Yu and Fu Suoli said goodbye, they had already left with the girls around him. He gave an irritable tusk, stepped on the accelerator, and the car rushed out a long way. Weekends are always the fastest, most people have fun for 2 whole days. At 6:30, Su Yu climbed to the floor where the classroom was holding the book. As soon as she entered the classroom, she was a little suspicious of her dizziness. There were not many people in the morning self-study on Monday, and most of the seats in the back of the classroom were empty. Only a few people read in the morning. She took the bread to the seat and sat down, looking around casually, only one thought in her mind: early self-study, everyone is very casual and chic. She took out the English book from the desk, turned to the vocabulary page, and began to write silently. While writing, still thinking. The teacher in this class does not seem to be very strict. I remember that the school she used to read was also a key high school in the city. Being late is a taboo. Everyone must be required to be in class at 6:10 in the morning, and a class will be fined 1 minute late. The students in the class are studying every minute and every second, never gossiping in get out of class, and never chasing after class. It is in stark contrast to her current class. Study early for the past half an hour. Approaching the time of the first class, the class gradually increased. There was a loud voice in the classroom. Those who have to rush for homework, those who have to pick up their homework, and those who have to copy homework, are a bit of a mess. Across the aisle, a boy borrowed a math paper written by Suyu over the weekend to check the answer. Suyu didn't say anything, so she looked through the drawer and handed it to the boy. She was still bowing her head to sort out her English notes, and she caught sight of someone stopping by her side. Suyu stopped the pen tip and looked up. A tall boy stood beside her. He is wearing a clean white school uniform, simple black sports trousers, and holding a form in his hand. "Hello classmates, I'm the monitor of class 9. "Ah, hello, what's the matter?" She put down the pen in her hand. Fu Suoli, who was playing with her mobile phone next to her, had an action. "That's it." The monitor put the form on her desk and explained in a few words, "This is the duty form of our class. You are scheduled to clean it on Wednesday." Suyu picked it up and looked at it and nodded, "I see, is it cleaning the classroom? Well, go with Fu Suoli." After the squad leader explained, he glanced to the side with seemingly imperceptible sight, then turned and walked back to his position. Fu Suoli looked at the back of the person walking away, retracted her gaze, and pretended to play with the phone again indifferently. After playing for a while, she couldn't help but talk to Suyu. "Hey, let me tell you, our class monitor has the same surname as you." Suyu said "Ah," and looked at her sideways, "Also surnamed Su." "That's right." Fu Suoli leaned close to her, "It's Su Xing-chun, is it Te Niang? He looks so Niang." "Su Xing-chun? I seem to have heard this name." Suyu frowned and thought, "Honestly, I think his name is the same as yours, he sounds very nice." After speaking, she recalled in her mind what the boy was like just now. The contour of the face is a bit thin, the eyebrows are delicate, and the tails of the eyes are long and narrow. Doesn't look like a mother. Suyu was very honest. Fu Suoli snorted, her expression unnatural, "What is the same as me? My name sounds better than him." Suyu felt a little strange, wanted to ask, but felt wrong, so he continued to lower his head to do his homework. Wrote for a while. Someone nearby put the test paper on her desk. "Classmate, there is one question that I did not calculate with you. I don't understand the way you write it." It was the boy who borrowed the paper from Suyu for the answer. He bent down slightly, pushed his glasses, and handed the draft paper to Suyu. "Could you please tell me something?" "Ah, which question?" Suyu pulled off the cap of the black pen and took the draft paper. "The penultimate question." She turned the paper over and found the question. Suyu glanced around, wrote on the paper, and explained the idea of solving the problem to the boy. "I used trigonometric functions to find the analytic geometry of this problem." Song Yifan entered the classroom at this time. He threw the school uniform jacket into the drawer and asked Fu Suoli, "Why are the glasses boy at the same table with you? Ask questions." "Fuck." Song Yifan was very surprised. He took out 2 homework books, turned his head and scribbled cleanly, "It's so hanging, you can ask the glasses boy to ask questions, you are at the same table as a master." The spectacle boy is called Chen Chunlin, and he is also regarded as a high school leader in the class. Unfortunately, his Chinese has always been poor, so he is not ranked high in the grade, but he is usually arrogant and doesn't look down on students with poor grades. Fu Suoli nodded absently, playing with her mobile phone. "Yes." Song Yifan continued, "Then don't lead people to talk trivial things in class, and delay others' entrance to Tsinghua and Peking University." "Who was admitted to Tsinghua University and Peking University?" "Thanks for stepping into the classroom." Standing behind Song Yifan, he heard their conversation, asked casually, and threw the school bag inside. Song Yifan got up to make room for him. "Why are you here so late? You don't have time to copy your homework." While talking, the door of the classroom was pushed open. Teacher Li, who teaches math, walked in, and the class bell rang. The noise in the class diminished. After Song Yifan finished copying the last word, he shook the test paper and squinted at his "Thanks, what are you doing with your math papers?" When Li becomes abnormal, you will collect them one by one, and you will have to stop again. Laugh. The thank you remarks glanced at him contemptuously, curled the corners of his lips, leaned on the back of the chair and called for Swilly. Fu Swilly turned around. What are you doing? Help me call you to be at the same table. Thanks for resigning, his chin gestured in Su Yu's direction. Before Fu Swilly could speak, Su Yu pulled out a completed math paper from a pile of paper on the table and handed it to her. After handing it over, he took the pen again and lowered his head to start the exercises. It doesn't matter what it looks like. I didn't even look at them during the whole process. But Fu Swilly understood, but was speechless. She took the test paper on the resignation desk. Can't you copy it yourself? Why do you always let others do your homework for you? Song Yifan was a listener with a subtle expression. In his impression, thank you speeches are not like to provoke girls. But you. Song Yifan put on his shoulders and asked in a low voice, you are a big man, why do you always bully a little girl? What kind of bullying? New classmates like to help me with my homework. Thanks to the phone, he smiled casually, lazily. The words fell silent. Su Yu turned around and met his eyes. The two looked at each other for a few seconds, and she said seriously, the new classmate doesn't like it very much. The tone is a bit brainy, but with a bit of Jiangnan's waxy, it sounds non-aggressive. Thanks to her, she leaned forward slightly, with her arm pressed against the desk, tilted her head, staring at her and smiling, why don't you like it? Her eyes are as clean as water, but her brows are slightly twisted, seemingly puzzled, why do you want to ask this kind of question? Thanks to raise an eyebrow. Then, a group of prodigal sons who don't like learning heard a sentence from the Southern Transfer student's soul chicken soup, you have to write your homework, and your knowledge is yours. The air freezes. Puff. There was a nervous atmosphere at first, but Song Yifan couldn't hold back a laugh. The thank you speech was startled, and the corners of his lips were slowly pulled up. Ha 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 ha. Fu Swilly stretched her hand over, squeezing Su Yu's face uncontrollably. Oh, this kid is so cute. Ahem. Song Yifan clenched his hand into a fist, put it to his lips, and barely stopped laughing. With a look of seriousness, he said, yes, that's right. Student Su is educationally correct. He said so well, he deserves to be the future of our motherland, the successor to socialism. After speaking, he clapped and clapped. Su Yu didn't know what they were laughing at. I was a little upset, said nothing, and turned around. Her back is straight, thin and thin. Soft black hair was loosely tied behind his head, and a few strands of broken hair hang down from the front of his forehead, covering the contours of his face. From the perspective of the thank you speech, you can only see the white and tender neck. Fuck. He retracted his gaze and cursed in a low voice. Su Yu was sitting in her seat and packing her books. The vertical air conditioner was breathing air conditioning behind her, and the air vent was just facing her, so she got goosebumps on her body. A steady stream of cool breezes blowing. Her fingertips were cold, and as soon as she took out the pen to write, she felt a rush of heat in her lower abdomen. Oops! This month was so hurriedly due to the transfer of schools, even the date of the aunt's aunt was forgotten. Annoyed, Su Yu turned out the sanitary napkin from his school bag, stuffed it into his jacket pocket, and checked the time. Sydney, how long will it take to go to class? Su Yu asked Fu Swilly. Fu Swilly looked at her strangely anxious, inexplicably, there are still 5 minutes, what's wrong? Su Yu nodded, bit her lip, got up and ran to the bathroom. When the solution is resolved, there are not many people in the corridor, and the corridor is quiet. Afraid of being late, Su Yu couldn't help speeding up and trot to the classroom. The classroom in Class 9 is in the middle of the 3rd floor, and there is a staircase at the back door. As soon as she reached the stairs at the corner of the classroom, her footsteps stopped. Stunned on the spot, Someone was kissing not far away. The girl stood on the steps, put her arms around the boy's neck, stood on her toes, her chest pressed against his chest. The boy didn't make any movements, so he half leaned on the wall lazily and let the girl kiss him. From her perspective, she could see the boy's face at a glance. It's thanks. After Suyu reacted, he couldn't help being stunned. A lot of people, what should the teacher do? She stayed in place, not advancing or retreating. It must be embarrassing to walk over rashly like this. But if you don't, you will be late for class. While hesitating, her eyes fluttered with shame, her face flushed. A thick and deep gaze came over. Thanks for finding her. The dark pupils have an unknown meaning deep in them, and the brows are raised. Suyu's cheeks are reddish, and her head is down in embarrassment. He wants to pretend that he hasn't seen him, so he can go quickly. When I speeded up my pace in a hurry, I heard a playful male voice next to me, "Student Su, have you seen enough?" She took a sigh of relief in her heart, and ran to the classroom before letting it out. Slowing down, Suyu pushed open the back door of the classroom, raised his hand, and whispered a report. The English teacher was lecturing with the workbook. After watching her for a long time, he asked slowly, "What did you do?" The teacher's surname is Zhang, a middle-aged woman, who is in menopause. Treating students very harshly, poor Suyu newcomer is not clear. She bit her lip and didn't want to delay the class time, but she kept explaining, "I'm sorry, teacher, I'm going to the toilet." Teacher Zhang asked, "Thank you, but you also go to the toilet." "What?" Suyu was stunned. Hearing someone laughing behind her, she turned her head abruptly and was startled. Xiefei didn't know when she had already stood behind her, the two were very close. His long body leaned against the edge of the door, his jacket slightly opened, and the skull on the t-shirt was exposed inside, just like the owner, flaunting Suyu's face. Seeing her look stunned, she smiled even harder, with a voice that only two people could hear, and asked ambiguously in a low voice, "Classmate, want to run after reading?" There was a roar in the back row. "I want to ask you something, thank you, which of my class is not late for you, you feel uncomfortable?" Teacher Zhang threw the workbook onto the podium, and the sharp voice pierced the classroom. Suyu was frightened when she heard it, so she didn't dare to talk to the thank you words anymore, and bowed her head silently. A few seconds passed. The man behind him raised his eyes and asked casually, "How do you think I am comfortable?" After the whole class was silent, there was an earth-shattering roar. The boys behind are lively, some whistling, some already laughing so much that they can't stand up straight on the table. Wu Pengfei yelled at him, "Brother Ci, just say it well, why is it suddenly nasty?" Their unobstructed smiley faces made the teacher even more angry. His face was flushed, and he gritted his teeth, preventing the number of people from having an attack. As a result, Suyu was allowed to return to her position, thanking her for resigning and stopping for a class outside the classroom. But he was not so honest, and within a few minutes, there was no one outside the classroom. Teacher Zhang took the book back again, trembling, and said in a weird manner, "I will have an exam the day after tomorrow. I can see if you can laugh so happy after the results come out." As soon as this remark came out, the class suddenly wailed. Someone asked, "Teacher, it's not long before school starts now." "It's not long before school starts to remind you." Suyu took out all the books, pressed her palms on her lower abdomen, and put her chin on the table, writing the third English reading. She was uncomfortable, so she had to distract some energy with homework. As soon as the get-out-of-class bell rang, the teacher went out, and the classroom was immediately noisy. Suyu lay down on the seat listlessly, his face pale. Zheng Xiaolin, who was sitting in front, holding paper and pen, just turned around to ask questions. She was startled by Suyu's weakness. She put things aside, turned her face to Suyu and asked, "Classmate, what's the matter with you? She did it, her stomach hurts. Fu Suoli replied instead of her while licking melon seeds. As a girl, Zheng Xiaolin reacted immediately, oh twice. Su Yu raised his head from his arms, and asked weakly, what's the matter, what's the matter? It's okay, I wanted to ask you a question, if you feel uncomfortable. Which question? Zheng Xiaolin pointed to an English topic in the exercise book and asked, why is the feel here in this part of the sentence? The teacher spoke too fast, I didn't understand it. Let me see. Su Yu took the book and read the title carefully. The pain in the abdomen was painful and painful. The cold sweat floated on her forehead, she pursed her dry lips, and explained to Zheng Xiaolin in the organization language, feel is a verb, followed by a predicative to explain the subject, so. Su Yu didn't come up with some energy, and she held up her spirit to give Zheng Xiaolin a topic. Talked for a while. Oh. I get it. Zheng Xiaolin suddenly realized that she thanked Su Yu gratefully and folded her hands together, Great God, thank you, I will copy it to the correction book now. After speaking, she turned around. Su Yu couldn't support it, and fell back on the table. After a while, wait for the pain to pass. She fumbled for the water cup from the drawer, helped the table to get up, and was about to go to the drinking fountain at the back of the classroom to get hot water. Thank you. Sitting on the 3 sets of seats by the corridor, the 2 long legs were overlapped and placed in the aisle, chatting with Song Yifan one after another. He absent-mindedly, from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Su Yu stopping next to him. Classmate, I want to catch water, can you let me go over it? She lowered her head slightly, her face was pale, and her voice was low, drowning in noisy voices. I don't know if I didn't hear it, or if I ignored her deliberately, without raising my eyes. Su Yu waited in place for a while, and found that his feet were also confiscated. She didn't bother to continue talking to him, and she didn't have the energy, so she lifted her foot and prepared to step over. The thank you speech suddenly smiled, and the tip of his tongue pressed his cheek. While talking to others, his right foot unexpectedly moved up. Su Yu's ankles were caught off guard and were caught by him. He didn't stop his movements and fell forward. She ran around with her hands trying to hold the edge of the table steady, but her whole body was unstable. In the confusion, she felt her arm being pulled aside forcibly. Song Yifan's mouth opened into a zero shape next to him, and he watched Su Yu just between the sparks and flints, and he threw himself on the body of thanks. A thought suddenly flashed through my mind, was the thank you speech intentional? The thank you note was hit by the oncoming water glass, hissed in pain, and Su Yu opened his hands to accept Su Yu. He slammed his back against the table behind him and snorted. The two made such a big move in the class. Kang, for a moment, the world seems to be quiet, everyone's eyes are focused, just to see this ambiguous scene. He breathed in the spray of heat in her ears. It seemed like a moment, and it seemed like a long time passed. Su Yu hadn't recovered from the shock, reacted for a few seconds, shaking fiercely, and quickly pushed away the thank you words to stand up. There were ill-intentioned whistles and roars in my ears. Thanks to her shoulders with one hand, and her waist with the other. With the thin school uniform between the fingertips, I felt the girl's soft touch. She has a light scent of jasmine. You quickly let me go. Feeling her struggle, his throat slid up and down, his face leaned close, his voice low, I'll be a human pad for you, thank you for not saying anything. Su Yu was shocked by this person's cheeky, and for the first time in his life, he didn't want to talk to a person so much. She bit her lip, her face flushed with shame, and tried to break free of his restraint. Classmate, you let me go first. What's your classmate, don't you know my name? He chuckled and laughed harder, his chest trembling. Seeing the two people spent so long, the other people's booing voices grew louder and louder. Ouch, you two classes should also pay attention to influence. Someone whistled here. The rest of the people agreed, yes, it's not suitable for children to say goodbye to the public. Thanks, resign, let go of your hand. Suyu said every word, embarrassing. Rao is that she has a good personality, and her patience is about to be polished at this time. Thanks with a smile, and said slowly, aren't you relying on me not to leave? Fu Suoli just heard a loud noise and looked back quickly. After reacting for a few seconds, she walked over quickly, pulled Suyu up, frowned and said, ACI, don't go too far. With an oh thank you, the lazy smile on the corners of the lips was not diminished. After Suyu stood firm, she whispered thank you to Sydney. Then, under the gaze of a circle of people, he squatted down silently, picked up the books that had been knocked down and scattered on the ground, and put them back on the table. Without raising his eyes from beginning to end, he walked slowly back to his seat without saying a word. The large school uniform jacket draped over the body, making the figure more and more delicate. Big brother, what are you doing, playing a rogue? Song Yifan also reacted at this moment, and asked a nonsense. He didn't respond, and his black eyes stared at Suyu's back. Fu Suoli frowned and accused, Suyu was uncomfortable at first, and you deliberately tossed her. Hey! Song Yifan was shocked, what's wrong with her, is she sick? You stupid! Force, you just got sick. Fu Suoli was furious and beat him. The girl is uncomfortable, why do you say it? Thanks for saying no words on the side. He leaned over and picked up the blue water glass that had fallen aside. Suyu propped his forehead with one hand, biting his lip, holding a pen and writing mathematical formulas silently on the draft paper over and over again. From trigonometric functions to space geometry, points, lines and surfaces, square roots, parentheses, decimal points. After writing for a while, I still feel very irritable, unable to calm down. She lowered her head, and just about to pull out the math workbook from the drawer, her face suddenly became hot. Suyu was startled, raised his head reflexively, and looked up. The thanks leaned lazily on her table. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and in the palm of her hand she held the water glass that had just been filled with warm water and pressed it to her face. He lowered his eyelids, leaned down slightly, attached to her ear and smiled softly, hey, don't be angry, hey.